Who doesn't like a good laugh when watching a film? Because I certainly do. And the term, they simply don't make them like they used to, can be justified when looking back at comedy films made at a certain time. In the late 90s, the teen comedy took cinemas by storm due to their raunchy subject matters. But it was in the 1980s when comedies really did hit the mainstream like never before. And we want to make some suggestions in no particular order for 5 80s comedies still worth your time. In at number 5 is an odd couple comedy from John Hughes, starring Steve Martin and the legendary John Candy, as two very different men trying to get home when the universe is doing what it can to make that as difficult as possible, and they find themselves having to travel home together through mishap after mishap, and that film is Planes, Trains and Automobiles. Steve Martin plays the uptight advertising executive Neil Page, who is trying to get home from New York to Chicago for Thanksgiving. He's rushing to catch his flight home, and his taxi is taken by John Candy's bumbling and overbearing shower curtain ring salesman, Del Griffith. Page's flight back to Chicago is delayed due to bad weather, and his first-class ticket is reassigned to a cramped coach seat right next to Del's. From the outset, Del's overly friendly, overbearing and extroverted demeanour clashes with Page's, who is reserved, uptight and stuck up. From the first meeting, Page is irritated by Del. The flight is diverted to Wichita due to bad weather, and they have to make alternative arrangements to get home. They have to find somewhere to stay for the first night in a dingy, rundown hotel where there is only one room left. So you can imagine that Neil's irritation with Del increases. And increase it does. Everything that Del does grates on Neil. The pair briefly part ways when Neil decides to catch a train, with Del hiring a car. Hijinks ensues, meaning that Neil and Del cross paths again. Further hijinks ensues as the film goes on, with each spiralling situation cascading into the next one, with the two practically inseparable throughout the journey. Neil tries to get away from Del and make his own way, but they always find themselves back in each other's company. Neil seems quite unlikable at times, treating Del a bit too harshly due to his irritation towards him and the bad luck that keeps occurring. I mean, to be fair, Del is quite funny, but I think I'd be annoyed with him during these situations, so I can kind of see it from Neil's perspective. Both men are flawed in their own ways, are very different, but begin to form a kind of bond. And the ending of the film is really heart-wrenching when you learn more about how different their lives really are. You as the viewer become much more sympathetic towards Del, to say the least, and that is the beauty of this film. It's not just a straight-up slapstick odd couple comedy. There are layers to these two characters, and this is an 80s comedy very much still worth your time. In at number 4 is one of the best parody comedies. One of the best, I might add. And this film parodied one of the biggest movies of all time. A true Mel Brooks classic, and that is Spaceballs. An obvious parody of Star Wars, as well as other major science fiction franchises such as Star Trek, Planet of the Apes and Alien.
Oh no, not again.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey.
The humour is clever yet crass.
I can't breathe in this thing.
Silly yet relatable, giving the pop culture phenomenon a real run for its money and using every trick in the book to make the audience laugh with the on-the-nose references.
Pizza the Hut!
The hero of the film is a dashing young mercenary played by Bill Pullman, and his sidekick Barth, a half-man, half-dog alien played again by John Candy in his second appearance on this list, and not his last. This guy was an absolute legend. Their characters are obvious parodies of Han Solo and Chewbacca, and they travel through space in a camper van called the Eagle 5. The villains are incompetent morons led by Mel Brooks' President Scrooge and his underlings Rick Moranis' Dark Helmet, an obvious parody of Darth Vader, and George Weiner's Colonel Sanders. The plot, it isn't complex. The baddies, known as Spaceballs, want to steal the air on planet Druidia to use on their own planet. The Spaceballs want to kidnap the princess of Druidia, Vesper, to use as a ransom to get the air, only for her to be rescued-ish by Lone Star and Barth. And then they get stranded on a desert planet and meet Yogurt, who teaches them about
The Force? No, the Schwartz.
Listen, the plot doesn't really matter. It's a parody film filled with a series of funny sketches and jokes that moves the story on, and it's entertaining as hell. The references are obvious and on the nose at times, but that's the charm of this film. It's really funny, and that's the point. It follows the same hero's journey that Star Wars followed, obviously, and is filled to the brim with pop culture references. A lot of the jokes are pretty clever in a light-hearted way. For example, the opening shot of Spaceball 1 flying over the camera mimics that of Star Wars' opening shot, yet it feels like the ship will never end. And that's the joke. A clever visual gag that sets the tone for what's to come. It's a silly yet great comedy that keeps you entertained throughout. It's wild and wacky and an 80s comedy that is still very much worth your time.
I knew it, I'm surrounded by assholes.
Our number 3 pick is another parody that pretty much ignited the whole parody subgenre. A Zucker Brothers comedy that was a product of its time yet has stood the test of time, and that is 1980's Airplane.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
The premise is simple. The crew on board a flight gets sick, so a passenger has to take over the controls to safely land the plane. In another genre, this would be serious stuff, but in Airplane, it's anything but. Ted Stryker, played by Robert Hayes, is dumped by his stewardess girlfriend, Elaine.
What a pisser.
In order to try and win her back, Ted follows her onto her flight, which is a bit creepy. Anyway, Ted is an ex-fighter pilot but is frightened of flying, suffering from post-traumatic stress following the war. Which war? Your guess is as good as mine. And he also has a drink problem where he can't find his own mouth. As the flight goes on, the passengers and the pilots get food poisoning, leaving Stryker no choice but to take the controls. Otherwise, the inflatable autopilot has to do the flying, and nobody wants that. The comedy is slapstick and at times juvenile and absurd, but incredibly funny. There are plenty of gags and running jokes that keep this a real contender for one of the greatest comedies of all time. The characters, although at times kooky and a little bit out there, do for the most part play it straight, with the legendary Leslie Nielsen delivering a career-best performance.
How soon can you land?
I can't tell.
You can tell me, I'm a doctor.
This is one of those films that you really should watch if you're feeling a bit down, because it will raise your spirits. It's hard to watch this film and try not to laugh. I mean, I guarantee that you would not be able to get through this film without even a little bit of a chuckle. There are other films that were lampooned in this, such as Jaws with the film's opening, Saturday Night Fever, Shane with how the captain inappropriately speaks to the young lad in the cockpit, and of course the Airport series of films that ran throughout the 1970s. It's a film that itself has been mimicked and referenced and is incredibly quotable. I mean, it really doesn't take itself too seriously at all, and it's not supposed to. It's my opinion that the spoof subgenre was birthed right here, and Airplane is most certainly a 1980s comedy that is very much still worth your time. Our number 2 recommendation is another John Hughes comedy that stars John Candy. Both Hughes and Candy were unquestionably the undisputed kings of 1980s comedies, amongst others, I guess. And this one is about a bumbling uncle who has to go and babysit for his brother's kids at the last minute. And this is the brilliant Uncle Buck. Candy played the bumbling fish out of water so well that he kind of made it his niche, and it's clear why Hughes wanted to work with Candy on so many of his films, because John Candy was simply brilliant. Buck is called late at night to go and watch over his brother's 3 kids, the middle one played by Macaulay Culkin, and it was this film that pretty much got Culkin the role in Home Alone. Well, that's the short version of the story anyway. Buck is a laid-back, carefree, free spirit who doesn't really like commitment or hard work. He's tasked with taking on a rebellious teenager, her crafty younger brother, and even younger sister. Buck has very little experience with looking after kids, and he can barely look after himself, but Buck is the last resort to look after these kids. The film has bags of heart, and Buck's naive but good nature means that he is a prime target for his teenage niece, Tia, to attempt to run rings around him. At first, she succeeds, but Buck starts to get to grips with parenthood, getting to know his nieces and nephew and slowly winning them over during the course of the film. Although he does have his work cut out with Tia. She feels that Buck is overbearing and a bit of a slob, which he is, but Buck certainly has all 3 kids' best interests at heart. This is a very enjoyable and funny film, When someone mentions John Candy, this is actually the first film I think of. He's no nonsense but kind-hearted. He almost feels like an inspiration for the likes of Homer Simpson and Peter Griffin to an extent. And watching Buck get to grips with the makeshift parenthood is comedy gold. He even garners some unwanted attention from the local lonely housewife. Uncle Buck is a classic John Hughes comedy and is one that I love to go back and watch now and again, and is most certainly an 80s comedy that is still very much worth your time.
Go downtown and have a rat gnaw that thing off your face.
And our number one recommendation is a, wait for it, Western. Yeah, people familiar with this channel know that I love my Westerns. But it's a comedy about three hapless actors who are mistaken for real heroes and are thrust into a situation way beyond their acting abilities. And this film is The Three Amigos, directed by John Landis.
The Three Amigos!
Starring Steve Martin, Martin Short and Chevy Chase as Lucky Day, a daban with a lasso, Ned Nederlander, a quick draw showman, and Dusty Bottoms, a show tune musician who are fired from their Hollywood roles as the Three Amigos by greedy film producer for having ideas above their station. Yet the Amigos aren't exactly the sharpest tools in the shed.
And you could kiss me on the veranda.
Lips would be fine.
They are then given the opportunity to travel to a Mexican town to what they think is a show where they have to scare off a bandit called El Guapo that they believe is the biggest actor in Mexico, and are offered a healthy sum to go. Their first encounter with three of El Guapo's men goes well, and they believe that they've scared off the bandits as part of the show. Yet not is all as they think. El Guapo isn't a well-known Mexican actor at all, but a real-life leader of a gang of bandits, and not a nice one at that. He has the town in his clutches, and the townsfolk thought that they were in fact hiring the Three Amigos, believing them to be real gunslingers. And guess what? They're not. After El Guapo and his men arrive in their numbers, they devastate the town and kidnap the mayor's daughter, Carmen. But it's time for the Three Amigos to become the real thing, with hilarious results.
Do you have anything besides Mexican food?
This is one of my all-time favourite films. It's a Western. As you know, I love my Westerns. And it's a very clever, very funny film with a bit of action to boot. Everyone is on point. The three main leads have their own skill sets that hold them in good stead. And the main villain, El Guapo, played by Alfonso Aru, who some might remember from Romancing the Stone, goes from villainous to humorous in a blink of an eye.
Open their stomachs, grab their intestines, and squeeze their shit out of them!
But the funniest character, in my humble opinion, is Jefe, El Guapo's brainless right-hand man.
Oh yes, you have a plethora.
The Three Amigos is brilliantly funny throughout and holds up really well today. There are some very memorable musical numbers by Randy Newman, best known for his music for Toy Story.
My little buttercup has the sweetest smile.
It's a film that I would highly recommend and very much has rewatch value. And this is a 1980s comedy that is still worth your time.
This town's getting too rough for me.
So that's our list. What 80s comedies would you recommend? Please feel free to let us know in the comments. And if you haven't already done so, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really does help out the channel. I've been Colin from the Critical Cinema Club, and until next time, take care.